first I want to tell you because in a very weird way, in my brain, I seem to know you forever. Like we don't know each other, but I remember being in a one of those weird art chat room things that was going on 20 years ago,
Yeah.
where you would post your paintings and you would get like awful feedback from other people, or so, and many
Yeah.
times good feedback. But it was just discussions and very very open, very sort of Wild West time of forums, of like art forums, and
Right.
um and I remember your paintings coming up, and this might have been like 2004, 2005, like literally like
Oh, that
20
was
years
way
ago.
back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was incredible because I think that I haven't checked, but I think you started your daily painting endeavor that long ago, which is absolutely mind blowing to me. Um, and we were trying to figure out like why were you doing this, and eventually you doing this on eBay, and maybe saying like a painting a day nowadays seems somewhat ubiquitous to some people.
Hmm. Yeah.
And maybe saying, oh, I'm just putting stuff on eBay may
Yeah.
seem like a normal thing for people nowadays.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but back then it was just backwards. Nothing would justify thinking of eBay as like a good marketplace for serious artwork.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're a tremendous painter. So,
Thank you.
nobody would think, maybe you would think, yeah, I'm having a yard sale and this is like something my grandma
All
had in
right.
yeah,
Right.
in her attic, and I'm going to put it on eBay and maybe I'll get like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
nothing like, serious kind of cool paintings where you couldn't even control your market, right? Because if you put it on eBay, maybe it goes for nothing or maybe it goes for like really good money. So I was mind blown back then. And I still am. I still think that you are like crazy ahead of your time. Like you should get so much credit for just being able to
Thank
see
you.
like, okay, internet is a thing, but people are
Right.
not using it to commercialize artwork. They really aren't. And you were the first person that I saw that, made a consistent effort. I mean, crazy consistent effort. And was able to, make a serious market from a place that there wasn't a market. Like nobody understood just regular people as market. You probably started the place I started, which was gallery. So we could start there.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember what
Okay.
prompted you to transition from your gallery, work and your gallery dynamics to saying like, no, I want some control? Do you remember like what that? I mean, if there was a little thing that like sparked that, or if there was something like bigger that did that.
It kind of built up. I was brought up in the 90s basically as a painter, late 80s, 90s. And so I did the gallery thing for a long time. By the end of the 90s, I was in a New York gallery on 57th Street, Fishbach Gallery. I was having shows there. They were doing well. Um, but I was doing these small pieces too all along, these small pieces that were Premier Coup. And I had done these for a long time. That's how I learned to paint. And so I was just doing those, but those are kind of building up because these galleries weren't that interested in the small pieces, really. They wanted my larger, more finished pieces. And so in the background, they were just kind of, getting put in boxes and stuff. And maybe my fellow painter friends would come by and look at them and they really liked them. And my friends and family kind of liked them, but I didn't really know what to do with them. And so one day I just decided I was just going to have like a studio show where I was just going to put these pieces up in my space at the time. And I just made, kind of got these lights that I put up and made a makeshift gallery space basically. And then I decided to have, kind of a party for my friends and family and collectors and stuff. And all the people who could no longer actually really afford my pieces at that
Mm.
point because my prices were going up and up and up for the larger pieces. And I thought it'd be nice just to have like a party slash opening. And I decided I would also, make these pieces really affordable. So I just priced them at $99 each. They were like 4 by 6 inches or something like that. And I had 100 of them and I stuck them up on the wall and, invited everybody to come by, had good booze, good music, and everybody came by. It was a great time. The show pretty much sold out. A lot of people bought their first painting ever, their
That's
first
nice.
original painting. I collected names and addresses for everybody that came in, which was ended up later on being really smart. And I sat back after that night, thinking that was, first of all, a really good time. Second of all, it felt great that I had control over this whole process from the opening to how they were showed, how they were lit, how they were hung. I was really excited about the fact that I could actually talk to my collectors and
Mm,
meet them, which with a gallery, you get separated from that more or less, right? They hold on to, they keep the collectors kind of separate from you in a lot of ways. They're certainly not sharing their addresses and things
mm,
like that that could help you connect with them later. And it felt really good. And so I started doing that every 6 months. And now there was some tension here, I think, a little bit between, me selling my work and the gallery,
of course. Yeah.
because, the gallery is always kind of, they don't want to see you selling things for inexpensive prices because it undercuts the market. But my gallery is pretty cool about it. They didn't really care that much because they felt like it was just these small paintings that were different enough from everything else. So it wasn't that big a deal. But that was back in a time where there was really a lot of tension between artists selling things directly to collectors and the galleries. Galleries generally did not like that. And they wanted a cut, even if you did sell things
Right.
directly, right? So there was all that going on. So this started happening, and the shows got bigger and bigger. And each time it just kind of doubled in size. And pretty soon I was in a warehouse space and I would have bands and magic shows and it was the demand was kind of building for it. And it was really just really exciting. And people would come by and support me and they would buy my work and everything. So it was really at that point that kind of Steve Jobs worked his magic and started making computers intuitive for people. And the internet started to becoming more common. People started getting email addresses and all that kind of stuff. And so all of this segued into, to make a long story short, segued into me sending emails out to people and just showing them work as I did them each day, more or less. It wasn't quite a painting a day back then. And it would be first come, first serve. And they would just jump on a painting and say, I want that one. And then they would send me a check and I would send them a painting. But it got to the point where it was just really hard for people to, uh, unless you were tethered to a computer, which was not common back
Right.
then, it was hard to get your hands on a painting because they were going so quickly. And so that's when I started looking into kind of eBay and all of that. I had one of my collectors say, hey, why don't you do eBay? And actually, eBay, one of the executives emailed me and said, hey, you should try eBay. Because at that point, I was getting some publicity. I had started
Right.
my Painting a Day blog and all that. So all of this started getting momentum. It started getting some, kind of the press started getting interested in it, not so much because of the work, but because of the hook of artists using the internet to sell directly to collectors. And musicians were already doing this at the time, and so were comedians and all this stuff. But I think artists seem to be late to the game. And I guess I was one of the pioneers of like starting to kind of use the internet to not, I mean, my goal wasn't to bypass galleries necessarily. It
Hmm.
just seemed like a smart thing to do. And it was nice to have control over every part of the process and to be able to sell my work the way I wanted to sell it. And that's really kind of that's kind of the story. That's kind of how it's gotten to where it is today. And a lot of people kind of jumped on board and kind of copied the idea of it. Julian Marrowsmith and Postcards
Yeah.
from Provence and Stephen Magzig and Postcards from Detroit, two of my favorite ones. And so it was really nice to see that all these artists were like, oh yeah, you can do this and you can do it in a way that's kind of serious and you can still be a painter and not, kind of feel like you're, as you say, eBay is kind of this yard sale. Back then it was just kind of seen as this this kind of just mess of a website with crap on it and everything. So it
Yeah.
was, there was a little bit of a controversy about it. Like not everybody was happy about the idea of it, but it turned out.
I still remember, like, way back then, feeling insecure about buying one of your paintings on eBay. Like, I'm totally
Yeah,
honest about it.
yeah,
I just wasn't used to that. And I was like, I don't know how you go about it. I
yeah,
mean, this is literally at the time when you would just, it was beginning to be okay for you to order books on like Barnes and Noble or something like that,
right,
on the
right,
website,
right. Yeah,
like Barnes and
exactly.
Noble. But there was still like a feeling of I don't know what's gonna show up. I'm just buying this pixel
Yeah.
of a painting, and I
Can
don't
I
know if
trust
it
this
shows up
guy?
exactly.
Yeah.
It's that's
Screens weren't quite as good, so you don't
right,
know if it look like what you think it's going to look like.
right,
Yeah,
and
all of that was kind of an issue. And I just thought, I just saw it, in my mind, the way I kind of made that work in my head, because I had all the same doubts you had, is that I thought, it's really just an auction mechanism. It's really just, I just saw it as kind of a trusted auction mechanism, a way for people. And I hate, I still don't like the eBay website. I don't like how it looks. It's still kind of cluttered to me. There's all sorts of things that they could do better. But I'm sending people directly to the auction, and
right.
people generally trust eBay to be, they kind of clamp down on fraud, people that's been around a long time. And even back then, people thought, it's kind of cheap, but I do trust that the prices are real. And you have reviews, so you can kind of see that people. So a lot of this was based on, as you said, you had doubts, but over time, people trusted it more and more. And so I thought that eBay was really the fastest way to get to a point where people trust you enough. They can see that you're being honest and that your followers who have been following you for years, they kind of say, okay, if it doesn't work out, I'm sure he'll handle it in an honest way. I can see that he's got lots of good reviews on eBay. So that doesn't, and you trust eBay that that's not fake. And so it was a way for me to kind of generate trust
Right.
in me, in my work, and that what you're seeing on the screen is more or less what you're going to get when you buy the painting. So
I think
that's
it mu-
how I view it.
I think it must have been tough for you because nowadays I do think that people consume paintings kind of differently, or the notion of painting, because
Mm.
they kind of shape that notion, based on what they see on their phone or on their, whatever screen they're
Yeah,
looking at.
yeah,
But, back then I was educated, as an artist in the 90s. So even though I was a, young artist back then, like there was no idea in my brain outside of like a printed image that you would find in catalogs or books, or you traveling to go see a painting. Like that's the reality of a
yeah,
painting, that you would
yeah,
have to see the painting. So
yeah,
you were probably in that threshold where people were beginning to be educated about being willing to say, I really don't know what this painting looks like, or feel like, or, you
yeah,
could sometimes put dimensions on a website, but you don't really understand those dimensions until you see the painting.
yeah,
So, in many ways, I think, again, I don't think a lot of people give you the credit you deserve, because a lot of that training of people just getting accustomed to saying, yeah, I can buy this online and I trust that it will show up and it'll be fine. I'm sure you were shipping everywhere around the world also, which is, nowadays shipping is like an insane thing, but I'm sure that international buyers were also saying like, yeah, sure, eventually it'll get here. And
yeah,
um and it's that surprise of, we go through the same thing. There's that surprise of saying like, I bought a painting, but that first moment that you unwrap it, or it's the first
yeah,
time that you're going to actually acknowledge that it's a painting. It's like, oh my
yeah,
God, it's this size. And,
yeah,
it's far more
yeah,
impasto-y than I thought, or way more saturated, or
yeah,
because the other thing that you did, which is crazy, is that you were doing like these are later on, these painted animations, or I don't know if you understand them as like eventually what was the remaining painting. I try to see them as paintings, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I think that, they in many ways they're kind of like stop motion animations, but I love the fact that it's this transformation of a painting, and then you get like a remaining painting, and you have this video to support the animated process, or the process the painting went through. But this is the part that I love. Your videos are like 360p, or like, it is like the lowest, because that's what I remember saving.
That's what I had back then. Yeah.
Right. I remember saving on my PS3, my PlayStation 3, some of the animations that you did. And it was like fine, because I had like, I remember when I first had it, I had like I don't know, like a very small TV, and they look great. And I remember saving them and wanting to watch them on my TV. So I put them on my PS3. But and my memory is like, they looked amazing. They were amazing back then. When I go back and see them, they are these like 2-pixel animations. And I think that that's one of the things that I love the most, that even at that time, you were kind of conscious that, sure, this is like a video record of what I'm doing, and it's not the best, and it doesn't quite matter that it's the best. But let me tell you, if you were doing this today, and if you put those animations on TikTok, it's like you would blow up. Like, people would just eat that up like crazy, because that's the sort of content that blows people's minds. Like, a lot of people are understanding of painting, but they don't really understand how to make a painting, what goes on when you make a painting. And then if you see like the flexibility of a painting, which you're like an absolute magician at doing that, because it's not at all easy to do what you do, to keep that surface so fresh but malleable, it's crazy. So that you can like constantly just interact with it and just go feed into it and just, add painting to that surface. That's crazy. That is crazy difficult. But I think people, even if people wouldn't understand that, all they would see is like, oh my God, this painting that turned into an animation, which is crazy. But once again, you had that instinct of like saying, hey, this would, I could turn painting, even though like painting had been part of like animated movies and stuff like that. I remember like Old Man at the Sea, or there's like a Russian artist who did like this animated painting. It's amazing. It's incredible. And nowadays, Matt Bollinger, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's an incredible artist. But he does these painted animations that are great. But what I loved about yours is that they kind of, I always thought of them as paintings. I thought that, this video part of it was just this beautiful kind of record of this transforming painting. But I always thought like, I love that the painting that remains is this, the end painting is this. And I'm sure people bought those paintings, and I'm sure collectors now have that tiny video of like, this painting that was, or all these paintings that were. I'm sure you've gotten probably people saying like, oh, I loved that moment of the painting right in the middle. And it's kind of sad that it's gone, but fine. But I love, if only you could have kept it right there, like that would have been amazing. Again, like this is, even though this was horrendous moment, like the stupidest years of art trying to be something else, but those could have been NFTs, and you could have made like crazy amount of money, like selling those videos as NFTs, and people would have gobbled them up. So again, I think in a very organic way, I don't know if you've noticed that, but your brain is probably like super in tune with like, oh, this is kind of something that's happening, and painting could fill this gap that doesn't even exist. And let me see if I could do some exercises or some, efforts into trying to fit painting into this. I think you have like incredible instincts regarding that. So, I would be very dumb if I wouldn't ask you how you see, well, the multi-part like question, I guess, but how has the transitioning been? Because I know that you went back to doing larger paintings, which has been very difficult for me, if I tell you the truth, because in our effort that has a video component to it, but because it has a video component to it, we do like manageable size paintings. Transitioning to the larger paintings that I used to do, before we started our project is kind of difficult, has been kind of difficult to for me to justify it in my brain.
Mm.
I'm sure that mechanically it's just making a big painting and that's it. But just in my brain, it's been a little bit difficult to transition. So first part, I guess, is how has transitioning for you been from a project that is, I mean, we have been doing our project for 4 years. You've been doing it for way, way longer than that. So, and I'm having, those moments where I understand how difficult it is to transition or to make something grow from that. So first of all, how did you transition? And second, seeing how ever changing it feels like the image bound industry feels nowadays with AI and all the stuff that's going on. How do you see painting kind of or your painting fitting into all of this stuff that's happening?
I don't really, I don't spend a lot of time kind of thinking about um, what is, it's not that I'm not knowledgeable about what's going on and what the current trends are and all that. I know all that. And I do keep tabs on AI and all that stuff. And I've written a bunch of articles about AI and what it means for painting and et cetera, and everything. But when I'm in my studio and I'm painting, I'm in a different headspace. I'm not really concerned. Like for instance, when I started doing the videos, I just wanted to see myself paint when I first started doing it. I wasn't going to put it online. I can't even remember if it was like feasible at the time to put
Mm,
anything online when I was doing my videos. And I was just curious to watch myself paint because it's different. It's, you kind of watch yourself paint and you're, it's really interesting. You're kind of, how the painting ends up and you know what you did in the painting. But when you watch yourself paint, it's like you find yourself rooting for yourself or booing or something. You're going, oh my God, why'd you do that? And so it was just kind of a project for me personally.
mm,
And then I thought, oh, this would be kind of interesting for people to watch. And then it grew into this, kind of a process painting and everything. And then I found myself kind of fiddling around with video and then animation.
mm,
And then I started transforming these into animations and creating movement but not traditional animation. It wasn't like I was trying to tell a story or I was interested in kind of just movement or anything. I wanted to mix in the idea of, kind of the flexibility of oil paint, the kind of magic of it. And I wanted to convey kind of the alchemy of paint when paint suddenly turns into something else, goes from
mm,
paint to something else, and then it goes back again. And I was really interested in kind of recreating that process. And video was just such, it's kind of magical back then. And so I started playing around with that, and then editing became much easier with iMovie. And then I
mm,
started really getting into, kind of longer kind of animation pieces. So to go back to your original question, that whole process was not me thinking, what's going on out there. People are doing more video gets more hits or anything. I was just really kind of it really came out of me experiment. That's not to say I wasn't aware that people would really love this, and I was aware that it would, the possibility of some of this as it did wildly going viral and all of that. I knew that that was part of it, but it was kind of a secondary consideration to everything else. And so when you talk about transition from, which, you're painting a day or working small or transitioning to working large, or like right now, for instance, I decided that I'm going to, go back to the old days here a little bit and just build up a body of work, which is basically what I've been working on for a while now, and not reveal it until it's all done so that
mm,
people can see it and experience it all at once as a series of paintings. And so that's hard
mm,
because you have this whole thing going where you kind of show your work as you finish it. That kind of helps you get stuff out there, and it creates kind of a momentum, and not to mention obviously income and all of that. And people have that expectation for a certain pace and all of that. And so I have this thing that I'm working on kind of in the background that I haven't shown anybody that I'll reveal somewhere down the road. So that's kind of example of like, a transition from like what's going on now to maybe something that I was more familiar with in the past that I'd like to revisit. In terms of large paintings, man, that brings up a lot of vision. I think one of the things you touched upon is that small paintings translate really easily, much more easily online.
Mm.
It's because scale's not an issue, and it's more or less what they see on their screen. Instagram, you got this little tiny thing, but people kind of, they get it. But when you try to translate, let's say, like I finished like a 9 foot plein air painting that
Nice.
I worked on for years. That's that is almost impossible to
Right.
translate online. So that goes against kind of everything that I've been doing. But it's all, sometimes I just feel like I have to, it always kind of serves my painting. What do I need as a painter? What interests me as a painter? And all the other stuff is kind of secondary to me. So there are a lot of things that just kind of flop online. They don't work. They're failures online.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even as a result of that, business wise, maybe they just don't sell or something. But I still do them.
Mm.
Um, so I think part of the tension is expectations that you've built up for yourself online, what your fans expect of you, and those kinds of considerations. But that's all stuff that I tried to keep as secondary to my development and my interests as a painter. So I don't really think of it, I don't think of it, oh, this is a transition or this is because I do that all along and I've always done it. It's just a natural part. A lot of people don't see it because some of it just fails and I just don't show it, you
Mm.
know. I know that you mentioned in your last interview, I think you were talking about galleries and gallery you were working with. I love the one where they told you to not show up to the
Not show up.
opening.
Yeah,
That's-
this wasn't good enough.
You are not, yeah, you are not.
It's never been good enough.
They did not want that at the
No,
opening.
no, no. No, it's always there's always been something. There's always been something with me. It's either the Colombian
That's
part
hilarious.
or the being younger or just like yeah, you don't look like, the I don't know what they were going for. I mean, overpriced. This was bubble. This was right in the middle of like the bubble of art like in the early 2000s, and they were selling for like 30 grand, and it's like, dude, you do not look like 30 grand. You do not like you do not
Stay
command
away.
you do not command those prices. So just
Well, the other thing is, I think that, when I looked at like, I had no idea what you looked like until you asked me to do the interview.
better
I
it's
had
better
no
that way.
clue, but yeah,
Better.
no, no, you're a very handsome man.
Oh.
Don't get, no, I've admired your paintings for a while now. I'm like, this guy knows how to paint and, just fascinating the way your paintings are just so satisfying and they translate so well online too. You just get a feel for the paint and everything. But you mentioned that suddenly the gallery wanted you to work big, right? So
Yeah.
is that the kind of tension that you're talking about? It's like you have this kind of comfort level, it's working online, and then suddenly
Yeah.
you
Yeah. We
steering you toward larger pieces.
what is very refreshing hearing you say is that you're not really thinking about those things. Like those are not the things that guide your thoughts, like your actions. And that's super nice for me because like you, and I think we kind of belong to that same generation, or at least that same philosophy of thought regarding the ways paintings were socialized. I do not belong to this moment, where people just understand social media as being like the force that it is. No,
Right.
I sent slides to galleries that I was hoping to be at, or
Yeah.
magazines, or
Yeah.
and you had to show up. You had to show up with a portfolio, and there was
Yep.
like interaction. And when they rejected you, it was to your face. And if they were
Yeah.
nice about it, they would write a letter, directed to you. And if they weren't, they would just write a letter directed to everyone. I don't know, like it wasn't personal. And if they weren't at all, they wouldn't write anything. They would just keep your slides and not care and not
Right.
even respond.
Right.
So I kind of was brought up with that feeling of, yeah, this is how you do things. So I've always believed that if all of this collapses, like if all of the social media in some way, I don't know how it would collapse, but let's say it just disappears, I kind of feel comfort in knowing, like, oh, I know myself outside of these things. Like, I've known myself forever
Yeah.
as a painter that kind of lived through
Yeah.
moments, not a ton of moments, but this was my formative years as a professional painter. Like,
Yeah.
I know myself how, how I would go about doing things if this doesn't, if this doesn't pan out. So I'm not scared of it. And it's super cool to hear you, also a person that belonged to that generation, say, like, yeah, I understand how these things affect me, because, for example, for us, it's just annoying how social media can be super unforgiving when it's used to you posting things constantly or us posting videos constantly. And of course, every bit of social media loves when you provide them with content consistently. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
yes, you're welcome. We love all your views. We love all your content, all the interaction. As soon as you cut that because life makes you not be that consistent, social media is like, no, 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 we forgot about you.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
no, 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 we're not
Yeah.
going to show your work that much. We're not going to showcase it. We're
Yeah.
going to forget about you a little bit. And
Yeah.
what I notice on people that rely heavily upon that is that you become enslaved to this, machine that you have to feed it. And if not, then the machine says, hey, we forgot about you. You're not
Yeah.
relevant anymore.
Yeah.
So I've
You
always, yes, please go
go
ahead.
ahead. I, yeah, social media is a hamster wheel.
Mm,
Everybody knows it. They're running an algorithm. You don't know who sees what when. You don't know. And it is, and it constantly tries to entice you to either pay them money to get things boosted. It's like this, they're addicting you in a way. And once they have you addicted for the likes and for all the comments and for, trying to make, they will then cut you. This is my sense over years of using social media, is that suddenly they'll kind of cut you off, but then they'll have the boost button, or they'll have the, do you want to boost this? Do you want to boost this post so that you can get back to that
mm,
high of the, so it's really kind of insidious. And I think
mm,
that, you mentioned back in the 90s where you'd have to, make these slides and you'd have to label them in a very particular way, depending on the gallery that you were sending them to. And you had to show up and you had to talk to the gallery director, and, you had to look at this. When you had a show back in the 90s, you maybe have, you maybe talk to 25, 50 people, right? Who would
mm,
see your work, talk to you about your work, maybe total in a month that you had the show up. Now, one of the animated videos I did got tens of millions of views.
it's
The
crazy.
change from the 90s, from, having a dozen people talk to you about your work and so forth, to suddenly have tens of million, football stadiums of people
Right.
seeing your work. And then it was, that was weird
Mm,
to kind of make that transition between the two. But one of the things that we got in the 90s that people who were brought up with the internet don't have, I think, or it's harder for them to get, I should say, is that in the 90s, we, you know, we weren't flooded with imagery.
right.
We had to kind of pick and choose. We'd have to go to a gallery to go see a particular work. We'd have to, maybe we'd go get a book or something, but you really had to show up and see the work. And you had to walk there or take a cab or take a subway in New York City and kind of go see these things. So you spent a lot more time alone with yourself in your studio, just working. Like at Brooklyn College, you would just work for 6 months before somebody would come out and kind of talk about your work with you.
Mm,
So by the time as painters, I think that we were on kind of solid ground. Like we knew who we were as painters. I think that just me personally,
mm-hmm,
if I was brought up in the age of the internet, I'm not sure what kind of painter I would be. I'm
mm,
not sure I would have the focus to steep myself in my own work the way I did in the 90s. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't.
Mm.
Like, I'm not sure I could have that kind of focus. So I think painters coming up, and they're great painters that have come up in the 90s. So I'm not saying this is, 90s good, 2000 on bad or anything like that. I'm just saying personally, I think that because I was had that foundation going into the internet, I could kind of put things into context and kind of step away and kind of see the landscape and kind of see the traps that were, kind of the internet could be. And so I felt like I could experiment and try things because I knew who I was as a painter.
Mm.
I think if I didn't have that, it would be very easy to, when you get in front of your easel now, you have thousands of voices in your head of
Mm.
painters that you see online. Like they see your work, they're like, oh, I really want to paint like him, or they see, these other painters, and you can just kind of, for whatever you're painting, you can find a specific solution by a specific painter out there. And it's so hard, you're just kind of jumping around on all these incredible painters and stuff because you, in your feed, you've got, you're seeing 1,000 painters all the time.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of be yourself as you're, standing in front of your easel if you've got an auditorium full of people behind you clapping or booing at what you do. And as you're painting, you're like, ah, man, I just saw this painter online. I kind of want to paint like him or this guy. And I really like how he does this or that. And I'm going to try to do that for a while. If I were in my 20s coming up in the digital age, I think I would be schizophrenic. I'm not sure I could
Mm.
find my way in all that. Like some of these, and there are painters out there that are doing it, but they kind of were brought up with it, I guess. But I don't think I would have had the constitution to do it. So by the time I got to the internet and all of that, I could really separate in my mind what I do at the easel, that kind of quiet at the easel,
Mm.
um, from the marketing side of it. So I felt like once I was done with my painting, I could kind of play around with, okay, how do I get my work out there? How can I, get people to, to see my work? And I could do all of that. And I'm not saying I'm like a monk where I was like not concerned about money or making money or anything like that. But I kept I I because of the 90s, I could keep those two worlds kind of
Mm.
separate. And so when I was doing animations, it's not that I wasn't like thinking about um, oh, people are going to love this or something like that. It was just that it wasn't something that was really different from what I already did in a lot of ways or what I was already interested in.
Mm.
So there's kind of a wall that I build around my easel and my paintings. And I'm not above playing to the crowd, but I understand when I'm doing that. And I understand, and I also know that when I'm doing it, it's not me being artificial. It's just an extension of what I already like to do. Um, so without the foundation of the 90s, I'm not sure where I'd be. Being able to just sit quietly in your easel without having a constant flood of painters, great painters and stuff out there that distract me
Yeah.
and paint. And so
Yeah.
because of that, I can kind of switch gears, I think, now. Um,
I
anyways, I think that
I remember, no, based on that, I remember the first time because there wasn't any. I mean, not that I can think of, but there wasn't any like you and Uglo paintings in New York when I was studying there. But
oh yeah.
I remember one of my teachers, David Soman, he brought in like a catalog of some still lifes, some of Uglo's still lifes, and we were like, "What the hell is this?" So, and it was so amazing because at the beginning of the class, like, either Max Ginsberg or Steve Assel, they would bring books, they would bring books or just like
Yeah.
small, super thin catalogs of all these artists that we had
Yeah.
no idea existed. And we would be like, what the hell? And I remember my first interaction with Uglo was just thinking like, this is a, paper thin catalog with just a
Yeah.
handful of images. And they blew my mind. But it's not as if you would go to I mean, back then I would have to go to the library to log in and see, but it wasn't. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, this was probably 97 maybe. So it
Okay.
wasn't like you would go there and you would just Google you and Uglo, and then you would get like this myriad of
Yeah.
images, and then you would be like, oh my God, this is what this guy does. And oh my God, Slate School. And then you could contextualize it with like British painting and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
No, it was nothing. Like it was just like this little droplet of like amazing painting that would, you know, stay in your brain, and you would be like, oh my
Yeah.
God. And you would kind of like dissect it. I still remember,
Yeah.
so much so that I just still remember the impact of like Steve showing us Nikolai Fechin for the first time. And I
Yeah.
was like, Jesus Christ. Or
Yeah.
Max showing us like itinerant Russian painters for the first time. And there was
Yeah.
that one library in New York that was a Russian bookstore that you would go there and be like, oh, do you have like a Repin or Kromskoy book? And they would be like, no,
Yeah.
no, no. Those are
I've got a
gone.
couple of those
It's like,
books. Yeah.
oh, maybe. And
Yeah.
you would be like, oh, I hope. And then it's like, no, 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 no more left. And you would be like,
Right.
oh, geez. Now how do I look at a Kramskoy or like a Repin
Yeah.
painting ever
Yeah.
again? Because in my mind I was like, no, that's gone. That's Barnes and
Yeah.
Noble. I would run to like, you know, the one on 6th Ave between like, I don't know, 23rd and 22nd, 23rd, 21st, whatever. I would run to see if they would have a book on all these painters that they would show me, and chances are that they didn't. And I was like, ah, but you know, that goes with what you were saying in the sense that I don't think we're built to just hold on to all of these amazing images. Like every time I look at my Instagram, like, and these kids are getting younger and younger and more amazing. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
them painting digitally, but that's painting to me. So, but when I see
Yeah.
them, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like there's so many good people in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that back then when I was younger, like I was sure that there was talented people in the world painting. Like that was like an abstract thought, but I'm sure that I truly believed that somewhere in the world there was somebody that was kicking ass painting. Like they were amazing.
Right.
Like, oh my God, have you seen her painting this large paint? No, I have no idea. I'm sure I'll never see it, but I'm sure she's incredible. So, but
Right.
going from that to now knowing, to now seeing, and then kind of feeding all those images into your brain, it is
Yeah.
crazy. I
It
remember
is.
there was this painter, Felix de la Concha, great painter, and he did these pillows. You know, he would paint. He would, you know, he would do something kind of like what you were doing, but it was amazing. He would do these sort of panoramics, and he actually did some in like Jersey. I remember like Palisade Avenue or something. He painted like that, and I was like, what? Because I used to live in Weehawken, so it looked like home for me. But he used to do this panoramics where he would go one day, he would just paint one section, he would return the next day, and he would record it. He would put like July 17th, July 18th, and he would record it, and then he would make those, you know, join those two paintings, and then third day, and then he would have this long panoramic, amazing of how, you know, time shifted, light shifted. It was
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. He did the same thing with like pillows. With, I guess he woke up and he looked at the pillows and he was like,
Oh,
oh,
that's good.
yeah, and he
I
was
like
like, oh, they speak about presence and absence and you know, all these beautiful things, and he has like a series. Maybe it's like a 3x4, so 12 in total, or 3x3, you know, grid.
That's cool.
I remember just seeing that one image, and not even being able to say, you know, I understand how beautiful this is, and I interiorize it and I can contextualize it. No, I remember I had to paint the freaking pillow like that. I had to, it was so important for me. It became so important that I had to go through that experience. And after that, I was like, okay, no more pillows for me. Or at least like understand what essentially was what was beautiful about that, which was presence and absence in a painting. And I was like, okay, how can we deal with that? But it was very small. I mean, it became huge once you tried to like have it make sense for you. But it was a very small beginning, and then it can turn into something bigger. But nowadays, oh my God, I don't know. I'm with you. I don't know how young people like deal with that much information. And not only a lot of, I mean, there's tons of information that's horrible, but even if you like weed it down and if you just concentrate on people that are talented, oh my God, there's so many people that are talented in this world, like working right now, that even that you're like, what do I do? How do I deal with this? And to the point that you were saying also, I know a lot of like young, you know, artists. I was a teacher for 12 years at the Fine Arts faculty, and you deal with like the drive that young artists have. And yeah, you can see how impactful it is for them to have likes or to be validated by some thing that they can't control. Because in a way, like I always tell Danny, like, and I know this to be true. This is not just like something you say. No, I know this to be true, like deep down. Like I could give a crap about Instagram. I could give it's a stupid number. And when you get more likes, it's a stupid number again. And when you get less likes, it's a stupid number again. Like it doesn't mean anything. It
Right.
doesn't. I'm not dumb, and I understand that that can translate into a potential market. Fine, but I mean that's just like a business, like a small business part of it. But for you to be beholden to whatever they want to do with you and however they want to treat you, like I'm so understanding of the fact that you just can't let that happen. You really can't. You can't,
No.
kind of renounce control so easily. And it's very sad to see young people um, be affected by it, like terribly affected by it.
Yeah.
Depression inducing, and
Yeah.
questioning your artwork and thinking like maybe it is bad. I thought this was good. No
Yeah.
response. Maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. Maybe this
Maybe I'm
is
not that
horrible.
great. Maybe this sucks.
It's
Is this
so
the path I should be
disheartening.
taking? Right.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah, it's hard to
disheartening.
watch.
It's
Um, you,
it's
you
terrible.
see
Yeah, go
you
ahead,
see
please.
some guys, you see some young people that are very mature and they're just plowing along and they seem very confident. But you'll see kids that get on there and they're great painters and they're experimenting and stuff, but you see them slowly kind of, you could see them getting affected by, the audience.
Mm,
And you can just kind of see the painting gets less exciting or less interesting, and they just kind of run out of gas. It's just
mm,
hard to keep up with the ups and downs of popularity and associating likes with quality.
mm.
And but it is so enticing,
Yeah.
and I completely understand that situation. And do you do well, like when you how do you handle being overwhelmed by seeing so many different painters? Like what I'll do is I find myself looking far less at my feed at
Right.
painters and stuff. And I actually unfollow a lot of painters just so I don't have them in my feed and distract me. And I kind of do lots of time where I shut down the internet completely for a while. And it takes a lot of effort
Yeah.
to kind of keep that out of my studio.
So one
What?
thing, and this I learned indirectly from you, but because I don't think when I was just following your paintings and following a painting a day from very early years, I don't think I ever read any interview that they did. And I know you were becoming like, quickly very popular, and you had interviews in places that would lead you to be even more popular. But I don't think, if I have to be super honest, I don't think I ever read any of those interviews, because your paintings would tell that story for me. Like I think I kind of understood you as a painter just based on your paintings. And one of the lessons that I got was like, there's painting everywhere. Like
Yeah,
there are no paint worthy things. Like painting, one of the saddest things that happens with painting is that we think that because we paint something, it suddenly validated that thing. Like that thing
right,
became more
right,
beautiful. So if it's like a cast shadow of a bike, I'm just going with the ones that I remember from you that
right,
are amazing. But it's not as if that cast shadow was nothing and then you painted it and it was like, oh my God, now the
right,
universe is beautiful. No, it was
right,
it's more, it speaks more about you being capable of saying like every moment, yeah, like there's painting in every single moment of life. Like every single moment. Whenever you think like life is at its most boring, there's a painting there. Whenever you think that there's nothing there, it's like an empty void, empty corner, there's a painting in that empty corner. So for me, I was like, this was super reassuring because I've always felt like my painting world like shrinks in a way. I don't know if you
yeah,
probably
yeah,
understand that, but
yeah,
I was painting, I was having like these grandiose ideas when I was younger, and I wanted to paint like big ass paintings. Like, I was very driven with like historical paintings by historical paintings. So I always thought you need to make that big painting just to be somebody.
right,
You need to. And strangely, organically, I started to paint smaller. So I started to paint like my mother, my father, like some
Yeah.
instances of my childhood home, and with my partner, with my fiance now, Danny. Like I paint her obsessively now. I have two kids that I've painted since they were little,
Yeah.
so it's always been like I've realized that my world is like smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, but I also see like a wealth of painting in there. And going back to what you asked, for some reason that is very comforting. Like knowing that regardless of what I see outside, like
Hmm.
my painting, the paintings that belong to my world are just like, right here at arm's length. Like they're just they're here. Anything is a painting. And so that gives me a ton of peace. But what I try to do with people that are super talented, I know this is I don't know if this sounds like cheesy, but I am very grateful. I always say like this world. I visually, because I don't know the people. I obviously don't know a vast majority of people that I follow and that I respect as artists, or that
Right.
I respect their output. I don't know them as people, but I'm very kind of innocent in that way, that I'm hoping that people that do good paintings are good
Right.
people too.
Right.
So I'm always like, I'm grateful that you exist and you do this. And this is
Right.
amazing. And I've kind of become accepting of the fact that I can't do that. And this universe is wonderful because they put
Yeah.
you here so you could do that. And I'm
It's
not speaking from my point, like, oh, they are filling up the voids that I create. No, 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 of course not. I'm just saying,
yeah.
like, as a unity, humanity, like, it's so beautiful to see that people have like these roles, and when you see their painting, you're like, oh, that's so beautiful. So I'm very
Yeah.
grateful, and it comes into my brain, and then I let it go. Like I
Yeah.
try to
Okay,
understand
that's interesting.
why they're great, like what that meant to me,
Yeah.
and then I let go. And then I let go, because to hold on to that is unmanageable. Like the weight of that, it's unbearable.
Yeah. It's not. I should clarify. It's not so much like a distracting envy
Mm.
that I have towards like super talented painters and so forth, or it's more like I get sucked in. It's
Yeah.
like, oh my
Yeah.
God, look at this guy, look at this. Oh, whoa. And then that guy feeds into a bunch of other, and then pretty soon I'm just like lost in, a million different
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And so that's when I have to, so I'm thinking like more in a broader sense of like cutting off like I find myself having to like carve out non-internet, non kind of contact time to
Yeah.
paint. And whereas in the old days, I feel like, it was kind of like the internet was like going underwater. You go underwater and you can only do it for so long, and then you come out
Right.
and it'd be kind of a relief. Sometimes now it feels like it's the other way around.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like the internet's like super comfortable, and
Yeah.
going underwater now is the real world,
Yeah.
that
It's crazy.
like, okay, now I've got, yeah, now it's like switched. And um, that's hard to, and then just imagine yourself being a young kid brought up in all this. But I suppose that they're used to this, they're
Yeah.
kind of used to gear changing and online, offline world and everything. I know my daughter just seems to effortlessly kind of go from one to the other, fairly easily.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, as you were describing that, I remember Danny. Danny loves Pinterest, which is the most
yeah,
rabbit hole one of them
yeah,
all,
that is deadly.
because
Yeah,
you can go from one. I always go through this when I'm like, "Ah, I'm looking for this painter, and let me see if I can find this painting, and
yeah,
I know I can find it through Pinterest if I can go down that rabbit hole, but it
yeah,
sucks you in, and it doesn't stop. You're like, oh my god,
yeah,
that's great. Oh my god, this is
yeah,
great. Oh, look at this. I hadn't thought of that. Oh, look at the, and
yeah,
then you
exactly.
catch yourself just like, right click and saving images like an idiot,
Yeah,
just consuming, consuming, consuming. And
you'll
what
never look at them
initially,
again.
yeah, Danny sometimes speaks about like, oh, I just needed like a moment of, yeah, I'm gonna carve this, because she paints, but she also kind of whittles and carves. So she's like,
Yeah,
oh, I need, I need to find like a little bit of inspiration doing this. I want to see, like, contextualize
right.
it a little bit, and I want to see what, some of the artists that I know do it really well, how they did it. And then she goes
Yeah,
like, 5 hours went by, and I thought that I was gonna do
Right.
this for 10 minutes and then work. And she's like, now I feel bad about myself because now everything that I saw is way better
Yeah.
than anything that I
Yeah.
could have ever done. And
Yeah.
I'm just, and you're kind of like defeated. You're like, Jesus, this is super tough. And
Yeah.
it does happen to me too, where, I'd be thinking, oh, let me take a second to look for this image just so that I remember. Like I have like I always speak of myself as just having one neuron. But that one neuron is good for visual memory.
Quite
Like
a neuron, right?
yeah, I have a good visual memory. Like if there's one thing that I'm good at, it's just remembering painters and paintings, and that's about
Uh-huh.
it. But when I want to check and see how my memory, like how that misremembering of something compares to the actual painting or something that I haven't seen in
Yeah.
a while, I always go looking, and then you can see that kind of whirlpool just like dragging you, and it's
Right.
very very tough to to say stop and go back to what you needed to do. I actually find
Right.
it super encouraging that you are going sort of against that nature of feeding into that social media, and you're saying, hey, I'm gonna work for, because I remember what it like. I didn't have many, but I had maybe 7 8 like solo shows, and that meant a year and a half of working. Like that
Yeah.
meant a year and a half to
Yeah.
2 years, because you would have to schedule it, but gallery schedule
Uh,
would always be like, okay, let's look 2 years from now or something like that.
Yeah.
um, which would mean that you just, maybe if somebody visits
Disappeared.
you and
Yeah.
you would want to show them what you were working on. I
Yeah.
remember going to Steve Assell's um,
Oh yeah.
studio when he was working. He would be like, no, 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 you can't see that. I'll show you this, but you can't see these.
Right.
So it was like, I guess we can't, and I guess it's going to be super beautiful when you get to see them at the opening in Forum or something. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was very beautiful. And I love that you are a person that has acknowledged and has been affected, in a good way also by, feeding content into this machine, also saying, you know what? I'm going to step back, and you know what? I'm going to tell my audience, be patient. And that's really beautiful. That's super, super nice, because nothing behaves that way nowadays. Like if there's a movie, there's always going to be like screenshots of, of it being filmed or something. And people
Right.
can't even wait to see the movie or a trailer. They're
Right.
like, there's always going to be photographers going, at the top of a building now, sniping
Yeah.
photographs of like, oh, this is this movie being filmed that's going to come out in 3 years.
Right.
And I've
Right.
always been like, that kind of ruins everything. Like, there's no magic anymore to like, something, like an opening. It was like a gift to go to a show opening, because you're like, Jesus Christ, yeah, where do these
Right.
paintings come from? Nowadays, it's like you just show even pictures of work in progress. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
this is what a
Yeah.
painting. These are the stages of a painting that doesn't even exist, right
Right.
now. And it's
Yep.
kind of, it is weird. It is very, very weird. But it has to do with people also loving that moment that they
It-
consume something. I
Yeah.
remember I have a screenshot. I must have it like somewhere, but somebody like one day just wrote a comment. This is the best painting I've seen today. I was like, and I was like, I guess that's
the
a
best
compliment.
painting I've
Yeah.
ever seen in my entire day.
I was like, and I felt it was genuine. I felt that this person was like, you
Oh,
know what?
I have no doubt that was
Yeah,
genuine.
you blew
Yeah.
my mind today,
Today.
and I'm
in the
grateful for
last
that.
2 hours.
And
you
I'm
blew my
so
mind.
grateful for that. And it's incredible. I was like, oh wow, that's how we do things
That's
now.
interesting. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I guess, yes, sure. That
Yep,
is
that
true.
makes perfect
But
sense.
in
Yeah.
the same way that you blew their minds today, tomorrow, if they don't follow you, they don't know who you are. They forgot, or they
Right,
feel
exactly.
betrayed. I
Yeah.
remember I was telling Danny there was a time, where Instagram was very, very grateful to me, and I was doing like these color pencil portraits, like these
Yeah,
kind
I
of
remember
weird,
those. Yeah.
expressive color pencil portraits. Oh my God, people were loving those things. And then eventually I kind of stopped, because those were for rewards that we were doing for a book, but that had to stop. That was like finite. And when I started doing something else, I would get messages from people in DMs and like, dude, so betrayed. I feel so betrayed. Like, I thought this was what your work looked like, not this that you're painting now, like this gray painting now. Like, what the hell? And I was like, oh my God, people don't even scroll down to see what happened before these color pencil drawings. No, it doesn't matter. Like, none
That's
of that
because, yeah,
matters.
that's where those social media algorithms, it's just so hard to tell how people are experiencing your work, you know?
Yeah. It's it's
Um,
it's terrible.
that's
Uh,
really,
Do you
uh,
have you seen in terms of your painting practice, has it shifted, from 20, 15, 20 years ago? As a painter, do you feel that um because in my case, it's been 4 years of this kind of constant painting also. Woof, the changes are, I mean, very visible, I feel.
yeah.
Do you think in terms of just formal practice of painting, you are a very different painter? Could you see that shift, and could you see where those changes, you know, or why those changes came to be? Or do you feel like you're pretty much like a more of a monolithic painter that kind of like stands the like all these tides, all these changes of tides?
No, I think when I look at my body of work over the years, I can see I've changed as a painter. I think my interests have been fairly kind of consistent, the kinds of things that I'm interested in and so forth. But I think one thing that's changed is that it's like I used to think of like my small pieces as being, okay, these are premier coup. These are one session paintings. And then when I do my pieces that take months, then I'm a different paint. It's like I felt like I was finding a different gear or something. I'm going to be this different kind of guy and different kind of painter. And those are kind of separate in terms in my mind.
Mm,
I think now I feel that they've gotten closer and closer together. And now I feel like when I start a long-term painting or something, it feels a lot like a prolonged Premier Coup painting.
oh,
And
nice.
Premier Coup, I feel like I can borrow between those two worlds, and they kind of come together much more fluidly now. There's not like a wall of separation between them. So I feel like in that sense, I'm a different painter than I was, and I think I I conceive of that as being a better painter.
Mm,
Um, and I think back, 15, 20 years ago, I think I was just more kind of stiff
mm,
and afraid of, you know, that kind of flexibility allows me to experiment and to be more connected to my subject, I think, and to the moment of whatever it is I'm doing. Whereas a long time ago, I felt like I was just more kind of a little bit more rigid and stiff when I paint. Stylistically, I'm not. Somebody else would have to. I don't. I'm not sure. I know that several years ago, I was kind of. I allowed myself to experiment for a couple of years where I was kind of being much more loose, colorful, and I was really kind of in. I started reading about David Park and those
mm.
California guys,
Oh,
Diebenkorn,
amazing.
and all of that. Yeah, the amazing
Mm,
kind of painters out there. And David Park, I was right. I just saw, I wasn't copying them, but the things that they were teaching and the things that they were,
mm.
that kind of affected my work. So there's probably a section in there, if you looked at it, you're like, oh, that's different. But I think overall, I'm just kind of becoming a more, I hope, kind of, it feels to me like just a little bit more dynamic painter in some ways, or more
Oh, that
flexible.
it's so wonderful to hear with the large paintings. What I get the most is people just saying, "Oh, this is so great." And it's going to be great when you get back to the larger paintings. It's going to be
Was that
even
right?
better when you get back to the larger
When you
paintings.
go back to doing your
Yeah.
normal
That
stuff, yeah,
that one I struggle a little bit with. I wish I
yeah,
could say that, it doesn't, like, that you have like this armor and it doesn't get to you. But that one,
yeah,
it makes me feel weird because sometimes in a small painting, I'm like, fuck, this is like, I'm sorry, but this is like the toughest painting I've ever had to paint.
right.
And you feel like the sense of accomplishment, going out of having painted, I don't know, in my case, I remember just going through hell, just painting like a bag of like loose change on a plastic bag and just
Yeah,
getting hit by sunlight. And I was like, damn, that was difficult. I was like,
I think
wow,
I
that
remember
was
that.
difficult.
I get
And
these.
and then if somebody just goes like, that is so cute, that is so quaint, but it's going to be so nice to see how that translates into the more bigger complex paintings. I'm like, really? So there are times, and I'll be super honest, that some comments have made me feel like you're doing lesser painting, but I'm very defensive of what I do because I blindly believe in what I do.
Yeah.
So at some point I'm just like, no, forget it. Like if I let these things affect me, like I would have never been able to paint, the last 4 or 5 years of
Yeah.
painting. But it's really reassuring, and it's quite beautiful to hear you say that now those two paintings kind of feel close to each other. Because I mean, in terms of practice, it's very difficult. Like
Very
the
different.
energy that is spent on a painting, like the most I've spent on a painting was like 8 months, which is kind of insane because it was at the time that I was trying to do like these multi-figure compositions, and I was thinking that
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what painting, like true painting, was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember, and I also did like a few other paintings that were lesser, like 6 months, 4 months, but I remember what that feels like and how difficult it is to sort of keep focus of what the drive was for that painting. Because at the
Yeah.
beginning you're like, yes, I want to attack this beast
Yeah.
of a painting, and everything's there. But 2 months go by and you have to remind yourself, like, why the hell did I want to paint this? Like, this is so
Yeah.
horrible now. Like, what
Right.
excited me about this? So like understanding how to access that is very difficult, which it's not really part of a short, I don't know how long it would take you to paint your paintings. Hours ranged from 3 to 5 hours, let's say, around that
Hmm.
time. But
Hmm.
but it's very different. Like it's very intense when you're painting something, and it's like a one-shot painting, and you're like, okay, I'm going to solve this, whatever that means, to solve something. But I'm going
Yeah.
to try and solve this in however long, in whatever time is necessary. Um, that's super intense. That's like crazy intense to do that. It's like bottled up like energy, which is really wonderful. But the other one is different. The other one is like, hey, pace yourself and understand this is a marathon. It's not like a sprint. But
Yeah. You,
I think that your brain must be doing something beautiful where it can say, you can do this, and you can have those two meet. They're not like, it's all painting in the end. So that can
right.
that can meet. In my brain, if I could tell you what my hope is, I always thought that I could paint large sketches. Like it
Mm.
sounds ridiculous,
Yeah.
but in my brain, that is like the most beautiful type of painting because it's more of like a proposition of some
Yeah.
sorts, of an image. Like you just, like everything is there, and you just know what's happening, or the beginning of this story, and then you're just like an immediate part of
Yeah.
the,
That's
I
great.
don't know, of the fleshing out of the story. Because I've always been obsessed by sketches and like prep studies
Yeah.
and unfinished paintings, like obsessed. Like I adore those, and I've always tried to understand why I'm so attracted to those. And
Have you,
yes, please.
I'm so, before I forget, have you seen the Constable paintings, the large 6 footers, the
Yeah,
study versus the finished
yeah,
pieces and
yeah.
stuff? That's incredible to me.
Incredible.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And that
Those,
kind of goes to kind of what you're talking about here. It's like the energy of the large,
hmm,
quote, study and the finished piece versus the finished piece is very different. They're both beautiful in their own way,
yeah,
but the 6 foot studies, you could tell that he just loved painting
yeah,
those.
yeah,
You could just see the excitement in the paint, and it's just so brushy, and it's a beautiful, beautiful
yeah.
paint.
I think there are artists that like, or like Menzel comes to mind. There's just
Mm.
artists that love to study, to like
Yeah.
literally sit there and just study, like figure out, try to like figure out, like, what does this armor feel like? Like, what do I have to do with gouache to make this armor feel like armor? I love
Right.
Menzel for that reason. That he did those
Incredible.
large paintings. He did that big, like, kind of forge painting.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
eventually he did like these gouache drawing studies, and that's the painter that he wanted to be. I always love that. I've always loved that. James Gurney, who's like an incredible artist.
Yeah.
I love when James is. I think James is at its purest when he's like, let me see this like little blade of grass, and he's just like
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
a blade of grass, and he just stays there,
But
trying
I think
to like.
there's always that tension, and I think
Mm,
it's been there for a long time between, for in the artist's head between, I really like the stuff. I like that section of, that kind of sense of a sketch and premier coup and this one moment you have and this expressiveness and in that one moment versus the, kind of more formal, longer term pieces. Back in the 90s, I used to break into not quite break into, they were
yeah, I'm calling
open.
the cops. Calling the
Yeah,
cops. I
yeah,
don't know what
they
you're about to
were supposed to
say.
be in there,
I think
but
you're incriminating yourself right now.
but
Stop.
old tobacco warehouses.
As your lawyer, I
As a
advise you to
lawyer, I would
stop.
suggest
Yeah.
that you clarify. Um, I would go into these unlocked buildings that obviously you're not supposed to be in, but there were no signs saying it. So I felt I was on firm legal ground. So I went in there and I would paint for like a month in there. I'd paint like an interior for a month, or I'd go, and that's kind of how I started painting. I would just
Mm,
paint these old buildings and just spend months and months and months working on the same painting. And you'd show up same time of day and you just look. And that was, this kind of long looking where you just look at something and you
mm,
allow it to develop, you allow the painting to develop and try to think about what this painting is about. It started out being about one thing and now it seems like it's going towards another thing. And then you take that and you do these little studies, where you just paint it. Like I used to paint these sunbeams crawling across the wall, and I'd have to kind of track them down and show up at the right time each day and wait for them to come back. And so those paintings were all about time, the
mm,
passage of time. And there were a series of landscape paintings, not landscape, but landscape and an interior painting I called transitory
mm,
paintings. And these are these paintings that I would do, and I would start out, and it would be like at this place that I always paint, Lux Farm, with my plein air class, and it would start out being a spring painting, and then I would let that dry, and I would kind of look at it and think about it and do some sketches and stuff, and I'd get back to that painting, and I'd paint on top of it, and I turned it into a summer painting,
mm.
same point of view, and then I'd paint on top of it again in the fall, and then I'd paint on top of it in the winter, and I kept doing that. It was just something, as as painters know, there's something nice about working on an old painting.
Oh,
You
beautiful.
know, work on this the texture is always
Mm,
changing, and you have this certain amount of freedom. You feel like it doesn't really matter. So it's kind of like restarting the painting completely because you're just changing it. And
mm,
you're not trying to preserve anything or save any part of it. And so you have that freedom that you had at the beginning of the painting, except you've got this kind of resolved underpainting underneath it
yeah.
that you can play off of. And so I did that kind of I did that with an interior too. And that's but always kind of next to that in the background, I was doing all of these quick Premier Coup studies. So I'd always have these two
Mm,
feelings kind of playing off of one another, and I was always very aware of the differences between them. But they had kind of time in common. They're all about time, and one's about the moment, one's about over time. And so slowly, as I said, these feelings started kind of fusing together in a way. And the large pieces, you were talking about kind of going to large, going to big. And when I first did, like, I decided I was going to take a small piece and kind of, see if I could translate that energy into a large piece. Like, can I make a large piece, like a 6 foot painting, feel like a giant painted it, a
yeah.
Premier Coup painting,
Oh, beautiful.
that kind
Yes,
of idea,
yes,
you know?
yes. 100%.
Now, could I pull that off? So I got the like brooms and trowels and buckets of paint, and it was just so fun, but so hard.
Yeah.
It was so hard to pull that off. So I feel for you with the
Yeah.
I always say that it's like going from physics to quantum physics. It's like when
Okay.
you it's a big shift from small.
Yeah.
Okay, that's like physics. It's like, okay, I kind of it's Newtonian. I get it. And then you go to big, and all of a sudden it's like all the rules change. It's like what worked here doesn't work
Doesn't work.
there.
Yeah.
You know, maybe this was a great painting this way, but it's not so great up there on a six
Yeah.
foot painting. It just changes. It's like the
Yeah.
scale does something to it, the physicality of what you have to do with the paint. You can't do large. It just doesn't work. So that was a bit of a struggle for me.
Yeah.
It
You know
still
what you
is.
described has always been like uh this dream of mine that I imagine myself as like a Goja Colossus, you know,
Yeah, that's
just
good.
kind
That's
of
awesome. Yeah,
lumbering, in
yeah.
this town, and I just like take a tree and I rip this tree out of like the earth and I dip it in paint, and that's my brush. And that's how you do, large
Right,
sketches. But it's
right.
literally that's literally like the image of like a giant, because you always try to like
Yeah,
extrapolate what you're doing, and you say, well, if I use this size brush on this tiny painting,
yeah. I just got to make it bigger. Right.
I just need a car. I just need to
Yeah,
put, a pig's hair on a car and just drive
yeah.
through a painting apparently to get that same stroke. But yeah,
Right.
but I guess that exercise is quite beautiful, trying to imagine what that energy would have to translate to like a
Yeah,
larger painting. So,
yeah,
but I have I have in mind that that's hopefully, universe nature gives me, time to sort of explore that in the future. But I know, I don't know, it's one of these weird things. I know that my day to day can change, and I could paint, things can change. But in for some reason in my gut, I kind of feel how it I'm gonna be, when I think of myself as an old painter, it's like I
yeah.
think that's what I'm gonna be. I don't know why I have this sense of like security. And, last question, I don't want to keep you up, for too long. But you were speaking about, doing this almost like these Monet type of exercises, like when he went to the cathedral or to the haystack, and he would just, go and do,
Yeah,
well, in his
yeah,
case, he would do one painting for each like season, let's say.
yeah,
Um, but the beautiful part of what you're doing is that you are going back into that subject matter and just seeing how it transforms. I remember David Hockney has like this beautiful video
yeah,
piece that you go through the same road, and it's like seasons changing, and it's quite
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but for you, that is like an example of inefficiency, of the most beautiful sense of like inefficiency. That is, I think that is at the heart of painting, because when painting is very true, it's not thinking about how long is this going to take. It's not thinking about how am I going to make money if this is going to take
yeah,
me,
yeah. Who's going to
four
buy this?
seasons to paint. But
Yeah,
did those thoughts ever go into your brain, like
yeah,
thinking about like, geez, I have to make rent? Because I think
yeah,
for younger painters, and for somebody like me also, when I see like pictures of Antonio Lopez painting at the intersection,
yeah,
and
yeah,
him
yeah,
saying like, yeah, I went out because, in Madrid sky changes, so it could only be like summertime, and I went out
yeah,
and it's not the sky, it's not the light that I needed, so I painted for like
yeah,
8 minutes, and then I, picked up and left.
yeah.
And everyone, that sounds amazing, but for somebody listening to that nowadays, thinking like, okay,
That's crazy.
I have
Yeah,
to make a living off of that. How
right.
do I do that? So
Yeah,
that's not
yeah,
even a
yeah.
good TikTok video. So how do you do that? So did that thought
Yeah.
ever go into your brain, like thinking, "Oof, this is
Well,
amazing, but
you,
what does this mean for me as a person that wants to live off of painting?"
you definitely have to weigh those concerns, right? Yeah, those concerns have got to enter your head at some point, right? You've got to be like, okay, how can I? It's not that I'm like, I can't do that because that's not going to make me money or anything like that. And it's not that I'm like thinking about it without like any of those concerns.
Mm.
Um, but I can find ways to, I try to kind of recraft my life for a little bit to try to go off on these kinds of paintings that are clearly not going to be super popular online. They're not going to, there's not going to be buyers knocking down the door for them. Um, but I do think that you have to make time for that as a painter to go off on these tangents that stem from your painting. I think that's how you get to be a better painter, whether or not they sell or not, or something like that. So I've got lots of like, I lucked out with the landscape project because I had some collectors come by and say, "We want that painting," and and I said, "Well, I'm going to be working on this over
Mm.
time. It's going to change constantly." And
Mm.
they said, that's okay. Just, just we'll put it on the wall. When you're ready, come and get it. And you
Mm.
can make a new painting. And so it became this, for them, this kind of cool
Oh, that's nice.
conceptual idea, this
Mm.
passage of time. So each time it became a new painting, they would hang it on the wall. And
That's beautiful.
yeah, it's kind of this beautiful thing. And, I have, I've had these followers over the years who have just been incredible. They're not necessarily painters. They don't know a lot about painting. Maybe some of them, a lot of them do, of course, but they kind of understand over time that I do these little things on the side that they may or may not like, and they accept it. And I've been very fortunate with that. And I think that that just comes from painting over time, that your followers get you and they understand where you're coming from. So, I don't do a painting each and every day presently because I'm working on other things. And nobody's ever said to me, hey, why aren't you doing more paintings? Or nobody's ever said to me, can't you do more of this or more of that? It's, that's part of the kind of power of being in control of your own destiny that way, in terms of followers and paintings and being able to present your work online um, the way you want. Um, I think I just went on a tangent there. What was your initial?
No, no, no. That was perfect.
I
We
was
could
wandering off there.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. We could on that note then we could
Okay.
no, we could end it. And once again, let me tell you that and I've said this publicly. I've always said that the artists, the two artists that kind of helped us in a sort of um, as a sort of guiding light for our project, where we were horrified because we had no idea if it was going to work or not. It was
Right.
James Gurney, and it was for sure like you. I had knowledge of what you had been doing for the longest time, and how generous you were, because working like that at that pace, there is a sense of generosity to your audience because you were making amazing paintings. I mean, you weren't just trying to get rid of these mediocre paintings; they were amazing, and you were kind of like relinquishing control of what they were going to be worth, because maybe a great painting could sell for $100. Maybe a painting that
Yeah.
anyone could say, wow, that's actually worth 1,000 times that amount.
Yeah.
But and you were totally fine with saying like, sure, yeah, but that's amazing that somebody got it for $100. And there were other
Yeah.
paintings that went for like a couple of thousands of dollars, but
Yeah.
it was very beautiful to see just you understanding that it was a painting. Like in the end, they were just like one of many paintings that you were going to do that were going to be part of your project. And yeah, sure, some of them are extraordinary. Like, in our brain, we can tell the ones that it's like, oh my God, that was magic when that happened. But
Right.
in a very beautiful way, they also become one of the lot. Like they are just one of many, and you were okay with it. So there were so many lessons in what you were doing that I simply wouldn't be if it wasn't for what you had done, and the effort that you had put behind. So I'm very, very grateful. And I had never met you, but I wanted to tell you how important you were during that part of both Danny and my life. So thank you, like genuinely from the heart, like thank you for all
Well,
you've done.
thank you. And I should emphasize that you have been one of my favorite painters to follow over the years. Like, I think your work is really great work. And I like what you're doing as well. And I've been very fortunate to have not only, kind of great fans and collectors and all of that, but to have fellow artists like yourself who are kind of going out there and kind of doing your own thing and making it yours and finding your own path, and to be able to learn from all these other painters over the years like yourself. So I feel very grateful for that as well. And thank you again for having me on.
No, thank you. So this was awesome. Thank you, Duane.
All right.
See
Take
you,
care.
and best of luck on the show. And I'm sure you're going to do amazing. So
Oh,
thank
thank you
you.
very much.